Praise the Lord. Jesus is the way and the truth and the life, and no man cometh unto the Father but through him. So on the 27th, last week, Friday the 27th, I was in the Court of Appeal in Ireland, where they were deciding whether to quashed convictions. Do you know what they said? That I had agreed with the judge of the district court. This actually came from a barrister of the state. Absolute shocking behaviour. You'd expect better from infants. The barrister for the state's best pursuit was to say that I had agreed with the district court that I had behaved in an antisocial manner. You can get this information by seeking the DAR, the digital audio recording of the day. And it will be in the submission. It is your entitlement to seek it. That the barrister for the state claimed that before the district court, the district civil court, I had agreed with the judge that I had behaved in an antisocial manner. Such blatant and shockingly juvenile tactics from one who's supposed to be a barrister at law representing our land. I ask you, how can a judge or a barrister at law who is seeking to remove the right to speech represent our land? How can he represent our state if he is seeking to remove freedom of expression, which is enshrined in the Irish Constitution? If he's seeking to remove freedom of expression and he won't discuss the grounds for which he's seeking that removal. I asked the judge in the Court of Appeal, I asked him and everybody there were 3 judges. When should a judge be allowed to take the freedom of speech away from a man? Give me one circumstances where a free man is not allowed to speak in public. Give me one example of a good idea to stop a free man speaking in public. Give me one idea, one example. When is it okay to tell a man he cannot speak? When should a judge ever tell a man he can't speak? People of Ireland, when should a judge of any court be allowed to tell a man he cannot speak in public while he's walking around a free citizen? The fact that a free citizen would be told by a judge not to speak isn't in and of itself high treason. It is actually an attack on your rights and freedoms. It is an attack of this district court on the civil freedoms of an Irish person. There is an attack right now on the freedoms of Irish citizens, and not only Irish citizens. But in other lands, which are in less disarray, which are less corrupt, they have removed the word insulting from certain legislations. The word insulting is one that is subjective. You know, you could tell that lady, I don't like your hair. You say, I don't like your hair today. And she might say, well, I like it. Now, she can choose to become insulted or not, but I've committed no crime. You understand? There's no crime in telling somebody that you don't like something or don't agree with something in Irish society. No law states that you cannot express your opinion. In fact, it says that those who are members of state in offices of the state, whose duty it is to uphold the law, must ensure that you have the platform upon which to express your opinions and beliefs, irrespective of whether somebody's insulted or not. So the word insulting is coming against your freedoms. And of course, those who are trying to usher in these nonsensical legislations don't want to have the discussion as to why it would ever be a good idea to remove the freedom of speech of a man. So instead of actually have the discussion, what they tried to do was say that I agreed that I had behaved in an antisocial manner. Why would somebody who had agreed that they had behaved in an antisocial manner then refuse to obey the civil order saying that you must stop speaking? Surely my actions alone declare that I was not in agreement with the judge. You wouldn't have had to have even heard a conversation. Why, if I agreed with the judge, would I then appeal his decision to the circuit court? Is that a sign of agreeing with the judge? Why would a large volume of my videos on Word on the Street Ministries on YouTube show that I did not agree with the judge that I was behaving in an antisocial manner? But this is just a distraction and a decoy. This is just arguing with yourself. And that's what they're seeking. They're trying to run away from having the discussion as it pertains to the laws and constitution of our land. So they're throwing muck, and it is juvenile. They're trying to create as much space and distance between them and actually being held accountable as they possibly can, so that they have, even when they were backed into a corner, like a rat backed into a corner, jumped at the face. Well, the face of this is simple. I do not agree that I've ever behaved in an antisocial manner by speaking in public, by preaching the gospel, by disagreeing with rhetorics and agendas of modern day liberalists. I don't agree with them. And so it makes sense that all they would have left to do is lie about the fundamental premise and my own position. That's all they could do. The last thing uttered in court was, Stephen agreed with the judge that he behaved in an antisocial manner. He might say something different now. That's actually the position the state took. Well, if I agreed, why are they standing there? Judicially reviewing a judicial review? Why would he be standing there if I had agreed? Why would I have failed to comply? You can call it a failure if you want. But I think that I did right by not complying with something that would utter, you cannot speak in public. Hands up here who thinks it's a good idea that their right to speak in public be taken away. Hands up here who thinks it's a good idea that their right to record would be taken away. So what we do as the preachers of God is we expose them in their folly, and that's all it can be described as, folly. So are we standing before these judges? Are we standing before these barristers? Of course not. They don't even grasp the basics of why we're there. If they can't even represent the basic plight and truth regarding the fundamental reason we're standing there before the Court of Appeal, how do you expect that they're seeking justice? Imagine that. Imagine that a barrister at law representing the state said that I agreed that I had behaved in an antisocial manner after I had lodged an appeal to the circuit court and a judicial review and a constitutional test of the sections under which I was first brought before the court. How does that example agreement with the judge's decision? How does that example it? How do you think that represents truthfully what's before the court that day? So clearly, they're acting like lunatics because there are demons involved there. Demons are like doolally spirits that go around that couldn't hold it together when they had bodies, and now they're trying to lead everybody else to death. That's pretty much what they are. When they had bodies, they were eating each other. And every imaginable evil, they were doing it when they had bodies. So now that they're disembodied, invisible spirits, they're entering into mankind and causing them to utter such stupidity before the Court of Appeal. Utter, mindless stupidity. That this man standing here, who didn't comply with the civil order, who lodged an appeal against this ruling of the judge, who asked the judge on the very same day, "Judge, do I have a reasonable excuse not to comply with this said civil order?" And do you know what the judge said? "That's a question for your solicitor." So the judge was even advising that I get myself a solicitor and pursue it. Because he knew I wasn't represented by a solicitor that day. I was representing myself. You see, the warning attached to a civil order says this: you must comply with said civil order unless you have a reasonable excuse not to. Well, what I said to the Court of Appeal was this: one who's looking for an excuse agrees, in one sense, that normally they would be expected not to speak. At no stage would I, as a public speaker, as a preacher, obviously agree with that position. So it would be preposterous to think that on the basis that I had said I had a reasonable excuse not to comply, that I was in agreement with the judge who said that I, need a reasonable excuse not to comply with his civil order. Such a mindless civil order in the first place. Such an unlawful request that a man, a free man, as he admitted, "You're free to go, Stephen. You're not under arrest, you're free to go." I'm free to go. Then am I a free Irishman? And if I'm a free Irishman, can I avail of all of my freedoms as an Irishman? Can I avail of all of my freedoms as a free Irishman? Or should there be some apprehension that if I engage in my freedoms as an Irishman, that I will be imprisoned? What do you think? Do you think that somebody who fails to comply with an order agrees with that order? So this is the mindless and weak position of the state. How do the Court of Appeal feel that they're adequately positioned to rule upon something that took years to arrive at? They took years to arrive at the quashing of the convictions that were alleged against me. The allegations that led to convictions were quashed by the High Court, by the way, who it took years for them to arrive at that decision.
Meditation, listen, a reflection for me.
So, if there is a civil order in place and somebody doesn't comply with that, obviously they think that it is invalid and unlawful as an order. So the reasonable excuse suggests that you should normally comply with a civil order. However, if the civil order is unlawful in its composition, there is no incumbency upon you to comply with it. And that is actually stated in the warning. It says, you must comply with said civil order unless there is a reasonable excuse not to. Now listen. The Court of Appeal, do they think that in a morning of listening to proportionality of a civil order, that they are qualified now to rule on something that took the High Court months and years? Days of hearing. Do they think that they're better qualified than our High Court in a morning of listening to proportionality? Accepting an appeal a month and 4 days late in the absence of any extension to appeal, do they feel that they've established their jurisdiction? I was lured by members of court staff to that hearing yesterday under false pretenses. They said that they were going to discuss the constitutionality of section 115 and 117, and they were only mentioned to this extent by the Barister of the state. There was supposed to be a test of the constitutionality of those sections, but that hasn't gone anywhere. That was it. That was them putting a full stop to it. Do they have that power? After scheduling it again in a court listing, after scheduling and mentioning the testing of section 115 and 117 again, they then fail to discuss it. It still remains untested, but they want to overturn the quashing of convictions that took the High Court years, months and years to arrive at. So I tell you, if you appeal a decision, that is action showing unequivocally, without any doubt, that you do not agree with the judge. So for the barrister of the state to actually say and utter such a nonsense is an insult to the taxpayer, that he would actually be paid for that contribution. That he would lie barefaced to the Court of Appeal, to 3 judges of our highest Court of Appeal, that he would lie barefaced in that manner, and that the 3 judges would fail to reprimand him, is absolutely treasonous and conspiratorial. The fact that a barrister would say that I agreed that I had behaved in an antisocial manner is an absolute corruption of the proceedings. It's a lie, and every action that I have taken exemplifies that perfectly. I asked the judge, do I have any reason here, and you can check the DAR, do I have a reasonable excuse not to comply with said civil order? This was on the day that the judge gave the ruling. I asked him, do I have any reason not to comply with this civil order? He said, that's a question for a solicitor. Even though I was standing in front of him, representing myself. Next action that exemplifies I did not agree with the judge's decision. An appeal to the Circuit Court, which was still pending on the basis that the High Court were going to test the constitutionality of the sections under which guards had prosecuted me unlawfully. It has been recently ruled by the High Court that guards do not have power to prosecute, period. Guards cannot take the position of prosecutor in court. That was not discussed on Friday. It's also said that guards are not allowed to represent the evidence of another member of An Garda Síochána in his absence or in his presence. He's not allowed to represent his evidence. He's only allowed to call him to give his evidence. So that reaffirms what was already the case. Guards are not lawyers. They've no training to prosecute. The only one who can prosecute in court is a trained lawyer, because they're representing both their client and the law of the land. So they're qualified so to do. The guard has authority, so he cannot show any bias. I mean, neither can a lawyer, but the lawyer is there to represent the client's side. The guard isn't. He's never allowed to do that for the impartiality of his office, so that everybody's held equal before the law, because the guard is the law, so long as he's complying with it. Do you understand how that works? So, there's your first example. The failure to test the constitutionality of the sections under which I was first brought into court shows corruption. It shows fear. They're afraid to stand there and have the discussion because they know that they cannot represent the truth if they try to confirm or profess or purport that those sections are lawful, because they're not. And that's why they're still running away. And that's why a barrister would stand there and arrogantly say, well, that test doesn't seem to have gone anywhere. As if there remains no further incumbency upon the High Court to complete that test. There absolutely does, because the High Court scheduled the testing of the constitutionality of those sections. So being that the High Court have already scheduled the testing of the constitutionality of those sections, it's absolutely out of place that there would be a judicial review yet. A judicial review of an incomplete case? What kind of corruption is that? A judicial review of an incomplete case? That's corruption. Why? Well, if anybody ever wanted to brush something in the schedule under the carpet, fail to actually address it, and then hold a judicial review of the proceedings that were incomplete. I mean, that's pretty basic. And then the judge, remember that the barrister representing the state said that I had agreed with the judge that I'd behaved in an antisocial manner. Where's this in the DAR? He would have to cite this in the DAR. This would be available in the digital audio recording. There would have to be no guesswork on that whatsoever. The digital audio recording would show any agreement I had with the judge, and therefore the barrister at law would have been able to cite that in the digital audio recording. He would have been able to say, look, judge, he said it here. Example. See example in the paper I've submitted to you. No, he only talking hearsay. He's only talking from his own mind. He's not proving what he's saying. And everything that is occurring proves him wrong, proves him a liar. Why? Because if you agree with a judge's civil order, you comply with it. If you agree with the judge's civil order, you comply with it. If you don't comply with it, you don't agree with it. Indeed, you don't agree with it. By action, you don't agree with it. And if you appeal his decision, that shows further that you don't agree with his decision. This is not very complicated. Then, if you ask for a testing of the constitutionality of the sections under which you were first brought to the court, you exemplify further that you do not agree with it. So why were they not allowed to use a digital audio recording to show and to cite very clearly that I had agreed with the judge, that I had behaved in an antisocial manner? Yet every video I've made since that day perfectly exemplifies that I do not agree with the judge who called me antisocial. The barrister at law actually said, the one representing the state, Stephen agreed he was antisocial. He might say something different now. He agreed with the judge on the court on the day that he was antisocial. He might say something different now. Sir, be very careful what hand signals you're making. It's called a right to a good name, sir. People are too freely making accusations, damning accusations in public nowadays. Way too freely. We have a right to a good name. It's actually against the law to call somebody, a lunatic or anything like this. But we can identify lunacy. You see, but we have to reasonably discuss it. Do you think that somebody agrees with the ruling of a judge if they appeal it? Or do you think that their appeal is a perfect example that they don't agree with it? Oh, Judge, I agree with you so much, I'm going to appeal your decision. You behaved in an antisocial manner. All right, I agree with that, now I'm going to appeal it. To what? Exemplify that I agree? Oh, I agree, so I'm going to order a testing of the constitutionality of those sections in our High Court. By the way, our High Court agreed that they should be tested, and then they failed to test them. Failure after failure, and now they're lying to such a blatant and petty and juvenile extent. It's like a child with chocolate all over their face saying, I didn't eat the cookies. We're standing there in the Court of Appeal, we're addressing an appeal and a judicial review. Imagine a Court of Appeal accepting a judicial review of a judicial review. I mean, it's ridiculous. And then the best thing that the barrister at law for the state can come up with is saying that I agreed that I was antisocial. Sure, he knows that he's antisocial. Oh, that's why there was a question, should I comply? That's why there was a failure to comply. That's why there was an appeal. That's why there was a judicial review. That's why there was a testing of the constitutionality scheduled. Because I agreed? What sort of nonsense is this? If I ever agreed with the judge of the district court that I had behaved in an antisocial manner, that would be on the digital audio recording. The fact that 3 judges of the Court of Appeal did not chastise this barrister at law for what he uttered and the lie he spake before the Court of Appeal. The fact that they didn't chastise him, reprimand him, and call him into question, rebuke him at least, for lying so blatantly before the court, shows that the court is in misconduct. And they're absolutely exposed now. 3 judges of the Court of Appeal failing to reprimand a barrister at law who's saying that the reason we're judicially reviewing a judicial review is because this man agrees that he was antisocial. What sort of moronic behaviour is this? From our highest Court of Appeal. What sort of moronic behaviour? What sort of lunacy? What sort of evil lying tactic is this? Absolutely hideous, and we shouldn't tolerate it. This is not what our courts are used for. This is not what our barristers at law are used for. Our barristers at law are not to be paid to lie in the Court of Appeal. And that's what happened on Friday. These men should not be paid. They're not representing the facts when the facts are available on record. It's available. You go to the digital audio recording of the district court and you will see that the guard behaved unlawfully in trying to prosecute because the High Court have ruled a guard should not prosecute in a court. He's not a lawyer. You will see that they acted unlawfully when they tried to represent the evidence of another guard, or guards plural, as was the case. The superintendent trying to represent evidence he himself did not gather, but his underlings did. And that evidence, which was, by the way, only prima facie, it was only hearsay, they were only writing down what other people said, none of it was solid irrefutable evidence witnessed by the guards themselves. Because that's not how an adult behaviour warning works. And it's unlawful in how it works. It asks a guard to operate outside of his jurisdiction in a civil matter and go and ratify what one person has said against another. Because they ratify it in that, they justify it as being the reason for a summons to court. When it's not even an accusation of unlawful behaviour having taken place. Because any of the complaints that were made against me, none of them amount to unlawful behaviour. And any of the complaints that were made about me that would amount to unlawful behaviour, which is one, racist. I was actually accused of being racist because, well, actually, the woman didn't give any evidence as to why she thought I was racist. None. The judge said, have you any evidence to that effect? And she said, no, not at this time. Well, then you've no evidence. So you're now uttering things in court that you've no evidence to back up. The judge should have told her to retract her statement, that this cannot be taken as truth against Mr. Talon's character. We've no evidence that he's ever been racist. Yet, racist and homophobic reaches the newspaper. So they're exposed, utterly exposed. And we're still waiting on the reason the judge deemed the behaviour antisocial. That has never been given. Why did the District Court of Wexford consider that a man preaching in public is antisocial behaviour? Is this antisocial behaviour? Am I now being antisocial? Speaking on an amp? A tour guide's amp in the public place? Is this antisocial? Is that why I'm not being arrested? Why am I not being arrested? Why am I back here preaching if I agree that this is antisocial? What sort of moronic utterance is that before a court of appeal in Ireland? That this man agreed he was antisocial. Oh, okay. Is that why he asked, was there a reasonable excuse not to comply with the civil order? Is that why he appealed the ruling of the judge? Is that why he sought a judicial review? Is that why he sought a testing of the constitutionality of the sections under which he was brought before the court? Is that why you're judicially reviewing a judicial review today? Because I agreed? that I was behaving in an antisocial manner. This was actually what the barrister at law representing the state uttered in the Court of Appeal in Dublin, and expects to be paid with taxpayers' money for so doing, for lying barefaced to the Court of Appeal, to 3 judges. Now I ask you, how do the Court of Appeal expect, on the basis of lying barristers, to come to a justified conclusion without reprimanding or chastising the barrister for his lies? How do they feel that in a morning's hearing, just a few hours, one morning, that they're now better positioned than the High Court of Ireland, who spent months and years coming to the conclusion that my convictions should be quashed? How does the Court of Appeal decide that they're better equipped in a few hours in the morning discussing the proportionality of a civil order, as though the civil order was already justifiable, so that they would only discuss its proportionality, completely refusing to discuss and failing to discuss whether the actual order had been come about in a lawful manner or not? Oh, Mr. Tallon agreed that he was antisocial. That's not even for discussion. He might say something different now, though. Not only would I say something different, I did. Not only would I say something different, I appealed his decision. Not only would I say something different, I asked him, was there a reasonable excuse not to comply with his decision? Not only would I say something different, I judicially reviewed his decision. Not only would I say something different, but I brought the sections under which he had purported to be justified in summoning me to the court to be tested for their constitutionality before the High Court of Ireland. So not only am I behaving in a lawful manner standing here today, but I have exposed that there is criminality in the bar and in the court. There is a failure to test the constitutionality of the sections 115 and 117, and they still have not done that. And all the barrister of the state uttered was, oh yeah, they were supposed to be bringing, in so many words, they were supposed to be bringing it before the court, but that doesn't seem to have gone anywhere. Why would there be a testing of the constitutionality of the sections if I agreed with the judge? These are in the same couple of sentences. He utters both these things. This is the sort of moronic behaviour that we have to suffer while these men are being paid by taxpayers' money. What sort of moronic behaviour is this? We don't have to see barristers at law lying in the Court of Appeal, lying about the position of the person they're opposing, fundamentally, ignoring the appeal, the judicial review, the test of the constitutionality that was abandoned like a shipwreck, when it's absolutely incumbent upon the High Court to do these tests, and it still remains their duty. It's not for a barrister of the state to say, oh, that doesn't seem to have gone anywhere. All right, we'll just drop it then, will we? Just put a full stop there, because the barrister at law said so. No, that's not how this works. When the High Court submit that they must test the constitutionality of sections for their lawfulness, for their constitutionality, that's what that means. For them to then fail to do so or to abandon that test is treason, because they have identified that there might be something opposed to the Constitution that they're failing to test, even though it has been brought to their attention. And they have admitted in the conclusion of the court, this remains an open question. Well, why are you leaving it to remain an open question when somebody's convictions are dependent upon whether you find it to be constitutional or not? Why are you leaving that an open question with a question mark over it, but yet vehemently and fervently pursuing the conviction of a man as your favoured point of attention? Even though the High Court have overturned those convictions. They've said, no, this man should not have been convicted. He should not have been even expected to comply with these civil orders. How this was come about is unlawful, they said. And now all the best that the barrister at law can come up with is Stephen agreed that he was antisocial. I mean, the fact that that man was not arrested right on the spot for lying to the judge shows the corruption. Because if he was representing the evidence, he would have been able to check the digital audio recording, and he would see straight away this man does not agree that he had behaved in an antisocial manner. That was the best that the Court of Appeal, the barrister representing the state, could come up with. This man agrees that he's antisocial. He might say something different now. Oh, by the way, that testing of the constitutionality, that doesn't seem to have gone anywhere. All right, the judge says, right, well, we reserve our decision and we'll be in touch. What? You reserve your decision? You just heard a barrister at law representing the state lie barefaced to this court, and you're reserving your decision on the basis of that evidence given? And you're not going to arrest this man for his lie, or at least investigate why he's lying? If he's misinformed or deliberately lying before the court, because a barrister at law representing such heavy issues should not be misinformed on the basics of the court case. Guys, it shows the headless nature of the spirit operating there. It's headless stuff. Absolutely mindless, harebrained stuff that a barrister of the Court of Ireland, that he would represent the state and lie barefaced to the court about the premise of the case. This man agrees that he behaved antisocially. If I agreed that I behaved antisocially, I would have ceased immediately doing what I was doing. I wouldn't have failed to comply with the civil order, believing I had a reasonable excuse not to. And of course you have, as a free man of Ireland walking around the street, of course you have the freedom to speak. Tell me here who thinks that a judge should tell them to stop talking, when not even an officer in the prison can. A bit of a disconnect there, guys. You would say, well, you should, well, if you were engaging in harassing behaviour, you should be told to stop engaging in harassing behaviour, not stop talking. But then, you see, they would have had to actually articulate what the harassing behaviour was, and they weren't able to because there was none. You see, it would have shown that they actually knew what they were talking about, or that a breach of the law had occurred, if they were actually able to prove that a breach of the law had occurred. And if they were able to prove that a breach of the law had occurred, they wouldn't have needed to summons me into a civil court. They would have been able to arrest me. And they weren't able to arrest me because I didn't break the law, and that's why they summoned me to a civil court, where a guard prosecuted me when it's against the law for him to do so. There are so many things stacked up against this case that should see it thrown out of the court like an avalanche, that if they try to pursue the overturning of these convictions, they will have so much egg on their face that they won't be able to pull it. They have so much egg on their face right now, as it stands, that it's a wonder that barrister at law hasn't been arrested and imprisoned. That he would actually misrepresent the case to such a harmful extent. Calculated harm, deliberate lie to try to harm the individual who they're trying to have imprisoned, even though the High Court said that they should have all their convictions quashed. They're still trying to pursue that, and all they can muster is a lie about the basis of the reason we're there to discuss the case. That's all they can do. That's all they have done. That's all they've been able to do. The barrister at law lying about the basis, the reason they're there. Can you imagine that? I travelled to Dublin to hear a barrister at law representing the state tell the 3 judges of the Court of Appeal that I agreed that I had behaved antisocially, in an antisocial manner. That was their position. That actually happened. You can check the digital audio recording of the day and you'll find it. And actually the barrister at law should have checked the digital audio recording of the day or cited it to prove that what he was saying was true. The judge didn't ask him for any evidence to prove what he was saying. He was allowed to submit that before the court. Again, not requiring evidence for what was uttered. Not one shred of evidence did the judge require or ask for. Absolute corruption. And on that footing, he would say, right, we're going to review. We're going to reserve our judgment. That was it. He allowed that to be the last thing uttered in the court. Stephen agrees that he's antisocial. Right, we'll reserve our judgment and be in touch. It was absolute, hideous train wreck. Let them be rebuked in Jesus' name. Exposed and rebuked in their evils, because they are exposed now for their nefarious agenda. That they're willing to lie to harm me, further harm me. They're lying about the reason we're there in the court. And this doesn't just harm me, this harms everybody who ever wanted to speak in public. Because what they're now telling you is, yes, you can speak in public if you say what we want you to say and don't say what we don't want you to say. That's all they've been able to come up with. That's the sum total. A judge of the Court of Appeal allowed a barrister of the state to make a statement that was actually a lie about the very reason we were all there. Imagine that, just imagine that. Can you imagine being before the Court of Appeal and a barrister of the state lies about why you're there and the judge doesn't hold him accountable? For example, the civil order is this: you should not speak or record in public. Can I ask the people here, who thinks it's a good idea that a judge should be allowed to tell you not to speak? Can a judge tell you not to speak? Can a judge tell you not to record? Like in a public place like this? Doesn't. There's no, and a lot of people are ignorant on this. There's a lot of confusion out there as to recording, and if I want to be on websites, or if I don't want to be online and all that kind of stuff, you can't record me. Not the case. There's a thing called no expectation of privacy in a public place. So when you go out in public, you don't have an expectation of privacy. You have an expectation of privacy when you're at home in your house. Okay, but people draw a false conclusion. There's one thing somebody looking at you in public. There's another thing somebody recording you in public. It's just the same as them looking at you. Except it means that they're not just looking at you there and then, they've recorded them looking at you then. It depends what it's being used for. See, if it's used for commercial, something that you don't agree with.
Maybe somebody used my picture and my recording
Mm-hmm.
in, just say Greenpeace, for instance. Say I didn't agree with what they were doing. They used me maybe in their campaign or an ad or something.
That's highly unlikely. Why would a...
Who knows? But I think that's what...
So you're saying if somebody used... But that's different. That's a different story, and they're not entitled to do that. And you could actually, if somebody misrepresents you, they could do that anyway. Like, they don't need a video to do that.
It's easier though.
No, it's harder, because how do you make a video say something that you didn't say?
No, they could use it in the wrong context.
They might. That's true. They could use it in the wrong context. But
If
you'd.
they haven't recorded you in the first place,
Mhm.
you haven't got that issue.
Yeah. Do you see? It's different if you just take a snippet of somebody talking, and you try to use it out of context. That's very different to recording everything and uploading it as it is.
Is that what you're...
That's what I've always done.
Right.
So, but still, even at that, if somebody takes something out of context, you always have the opportunity to refute what they've said.
Only if I know that they've used it.
Yeah, but then what's the problem if you don't know?
Well, because other people could see it, know me, and
Tell you.
either tell me or just strike an inference.
Or they might have them at all. Still, if I don't look, I won't know.
Somebody misrepresenting what you say can happen on any platform in any mode or medium. That the fact that they've recorded you is irrelevant, because actually, if they record you, what you're saying is what you've said. So if they record you, you're actually evidencing your own position.
Provided it's used in the same context.
I don't know how you can use it in the wrong context.
It all depends what the people are...
Yeah, but people are going to form their opinions on what people say or do anyway. So whether you're being recorded or not is irrelevant. You see, there's actually so many benefits to recording. That's why they want to bury it. Because it's the people who have nefarious agenda don't want to be recorded while they're doing their evil, who want it quashed. So that's why recording is such a valuable thing.
And that's why CCTV is good.
Exists. It's,
Where
but it's also,
police officers are using webcams.
yeah. So they're entitled to do it. So it should be expected that everybody's entitled to do it. You see, yeah.
What you're doing is no different.
Yeah, so you have to ask the question. It's actually more harmful to be told you can't record than it is to allow everybody to record. Because if you're not allowed to record, you can't record somebody breaking the law. So that's actually more harmful and more likely than somebody using your name out of context, and which you can't stop anyway by telling people they can't record. So we have to say, well, actually, the potential for greater evil is in preventing people from being able to record. So we have to reason these things. Courts don't have reasonable conversations like we've just had. They like to railroad you. They like to have the script already set for the day, and they like to stomp on your opportunity to refute what they've said and just kind of bypass you. Or they'll have you speak and then they'll give somebody else the last word, and then they won't let you respond. You know. So I was actually in the thank you for your time. Have a nice day. Thanks for the discussion. Yeah, discussion is important, because you see how when we discuss and we look at the ideas, we can actually come to a conclusion, and we can both have our say, and we might even change the mind of the other person if we have the opportunity to talk. Because there might be something that they haven't seen that we've seen, or there might be something that they've seen that we haven't seen, and so listening to them can improve us, or them listening to us can improve them. And that's why we have to have the opportunity to discuss. Why are our high courts not affording us the same opportunities? Well, it's because they have an agenda that they don't want to step down from. And giving you the opportunity to say something that might actually edify the people watching on would actually harm their agenda. So they don't give you that opportunity. And they harm themselves when they misrepresent what you're there to do. They lie about you, they're exposed. As soon as they lie about you in a way that can be perceived and obviously seen by other people, they've exposed themselves and harmed themselves in their own agenda. And that's what has happened in the Court of Appeal in Ireland. The barrister for the state lied about me. He said that I agreed with the judge that I had behaved in an antisocial manner. Because if I had agreed with the judge that I behaved in an antisocial manner, we'd be on a completely different footing, wouldn't we? Why would I be asking for a judicial review? Why would I be appealing the decision of the judge if I agreed with him? Why would I be failing to comply with the civil order if I agreed with the judge? Why? I wouldn't. It doesn't make any sense that I would do that. Why would I do that? Oh yeah, Judge, I agree with you, so I'm not going to comply with your order. Oh yeah, Judge, I agree with you, so I'm going to appeal your decision. Oh yeah, Judge, I agree with you, that's why I'm going to ask for a judicial review of your decision and your decision-making process. Judge, I agree with you, so that's why I'm going to seek the testing of the constitutionality of the sections under which you first made your ruling. That doesn't show that the person agrees that they've behaved in an antisocial manner. So the judge, the barrister for the state has lied before 3 judges of the Court of Appeal on the fundamentals of the case. And I'm still asking, and this is no way putting into question the abilities of the 3 judges of the Court of Appeal. Absolutely not. What it's questioning is, how do they think that in such a short space of time they can make a better decision than that of the High Court, who made their decision, who are equally qualified judges, who made their decision over months and years? How do they think that in a morning's hearing that they're better qualified to make a better decision? There would have to be a significant finding that the High Court were not aware of. There'd have to be something significantly different. And that's not the case. All we're seeing is that the barrister for the state is lying about me in court, in the highest courts of this land, on such heavy matters. They're just outright lying about me. I was in shock. I was in shock, but I wasn't surprised entirely, because they've been lying about me all the way along. But the fact that they would lie about me to this extent has exposed them. They're absolutely exposed. It's finished. Where do they go from here after lying about the basics of the case? Anybody can see, by the way, you can check it out. Go to request the digital audio recording. Actually, I think I have it in email, and I'll publish it on my Facebook page. You can go there and check it. The digital audio recording of the day in question. And you can search the digital audio recording and see if anywhere along that court case I agreed that I behaved in an antisocial manner. And, if I had, then the barrister for the state would have been able to show that. He would have been able to say, look, on example, this portion of the digital audio recording, Judge, I've marked it, I've highlighted it there for you. You can see where Mr. Talon agreed that he behaved in it. Nothing of that sort, because I never said it. It's a ridiculous and preposterous idea that somebody who agreed would fail to comply with the civil order, who would refuse to on the basis that they had a reasonable excuse not to. Because it's not reasonable to ask a free man not to speak. It's not reasonable to ask a free man not to talk. These are not reasonable things when they're lawfully acceptable behaviours in society. It still hasn't been shown how in any way I've behaved in an unlawful manner. If it had, then one might even say, well, on that basis, Judge, I agree. But because I'm not trying to escape justice if justice should be served. But justice is that I be set free because I've done nothing unlawful. Justice is that I be compensated for the harm that has been done to my life in the interim by this lengthy process that shouldn't have been required if the judge did his job properly in the first place. in the first place. So the Bible says, open rebuke is better than hidden love. Hidden love is no love at all. It doesn't actually exist. If you're not willing to come out and edify people and say, look, this evil has occurred, you're actually coming along with those who would harm those people. If you walk your children into degrees of ignorance because of the society's narratives and rhetorics, even though you know better, how can you love those people? How can you love the people around you if you're not willing to expose the corruptions that are attempting to remove their right to free speech and free expression of all kinds? But judges are supposed to sit there and discuss the evidence. That's what they're supposed to discuss. And at no stage has the evidence been discussed. At no stage has it been shown that I have behaved in an antisocial manner, which, by the way, has to be an unlawful manner. You can't have an antisocial manner which isn't unlawful. Do you understand? So, if I had behaved in an unlawful manner, equating to an antisocial manner, because the two are the same. If I had behaved in an antisocial manner, I would have and should have been arrested if I had been doing it for 3 years. But at no stage did they arrest me, justifiably. Actually, on one occasion, they asked me to leave the area, and that's the way I said justifiably. On one occasion, they asked me to leave the area. Then they actually put me in prison, in Clover Hill Prison, for 6 days. Then I was brought before the court, and the court said I had a reasonable excuse not to comply with the order to leave the area. So I hadn't broken the law, and they couldn't show that I did. So if at one time I had a reasonable excuse not to comply, why would they expect that I would suddenly comply with something that had been shown by a court to be an unlawful request? Why would they think that I would then suddenly comply with something that had otherwise been shown unlawful in a court of law? So this is bad. What they're doing is highly unlawful, treasonous behaviour, and it needs to cease. Now, the Court of Appeal of Ireland are accepting lying barristers' submissions and not chastising, reprimanding or rebuking them in any way. Lying barristers. I mean, lying about the fundaments. Can you imagine somebody who had their car robbed going before the court and saying, and the defendant, the defendant's barrister says, no, she said he could use the car. She's standing there because she didn't tell him she could use the car. And the best defence the barrister has is, she told him he could use it. What? But he wasn't even there. How is the barrister going to represent what happened in a case he wasn't even present in, with certainty, failing presenting the digital audio recording of that case? And how would a judge of the Court of Appeal accept such a submission that lies, even though the fact that you're standing there proves otherwise? The fact that we're standing before the Court of Appeal, hearing a judicial review of a judicial review, means that I don't agree. The fact that we're actually standing there, the reason that barrister was getting paid shows that he was lying. Are you following now? The reason that barrister was being paid exposes him as a liar. He was there to hear a judicial review of a judicial review. So they're going to pay him now to lie? Or should we as taxpayers pay liars? We should pay lawyers, but not liars. That's not how they're supposed to operate a functioning court, misrepresenting even what's proven to be different to what he's saying. I mean, it's proven, it's evidenced. I mean, I'm not going to spend much more time on it. To spend much more time on it would be also lunacy. To keep, churning that around in your head would be lunacy. It's exposed, guys. It's over. Barristers at law for the state lying about the fundamentals of the case, even though your very standing there proves them a liar. Absolutely ridiculous conduct. I mean, could it be any more ridiculous? No. These are weighty issues. They're talking about imprisoning a man for 7 months for speaking in public. And then the barrister for the state comes in and says, this man agrees he behaved in an antisocial manner. That's it. That's all he had. He knows he's antisocial. Imagine that, like. Can you imagine that that actually happened in the Court of Appeal? Such corruption. Such hideous corruption. Such a willingness to lie before a Court of Appeal, the highest courts of appeal of this land. Hideous stuff. I mean, they know no limits to their folly. They know no limits to their folly. That's been exemplified. That's proven truth. They just accelerate into it. This man agrees with the judge that he was antisocial. I'm standing here opposing you because I agree with the judge? What nonsense to be uttered before the Court of Appeal. Then the judge just brushes over that, sits forward in his chair and says, right, we reserve our judgment, we'll be in contact with all parties. And a morning discussing proportionality of a civil order, they think they're better qualified than the High Court to make a judgment on it? After the lying submission of a barrister of the state? They should immediately have said, this can't stand. Immediately. We've just been lied to by a barrister of the state. This cannot stand. That's what should have occurred. Jesus is Lord. Amen.